like I had done one thing and there was a step that I missed and I needed to go back and do that thing. And I just sat there and I remember just bawling my little eyes out like,
Yeah,
baby, it's
yeah.
just not going to work. Welcome to the Bare Naked Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Simmons. The Bare Naked Podcast is about truth and authenticity. It is about creating an atmosphere where we could have courageous conversations about taboo topics without judgment. Our goal is to cultivate healing, understanding, and transformation. Thank you for being here today. I am incredibly excited to have my guest, my sister, my friend on this show today. And she is an amazing human being. Listen, if you don't know her, you need to get to know her. She will introduce herself. We're discussing entrepreneurship and mental health, a crucial topic that's not talked about enough. And I couldn't think of a better person to have on this show at this time than our very own Patience Noah. Woo! Welcome, Patience. Please introduce
Thank you,
yourself
Dr.
to the
Simmons.
audience.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Patience Noah. I am the owner of Patience Noah Insurance, and we've been in business for 4 years now. For those of you guys who know me outside of entrepreneurship, I was Miss Liberia USA 2012. So that's how I'm known in the community. But now I'm an entrepreneur now. So that's my new title that I bear. And so I have a full service insurance agency where we educate, we advocate, and we help our clients plan for the unexpected. And we do that by providing auto, home, business, life insurance. So basically, any type of insurance you need, we are go-to people.
That's awesome. You answered the question I was just going to ask, which is, well, what kinds of insurance do you offer? But it sounds like you offer the full spectrum of insurance.
Yes, we do.
Nice.
We're full service. Yes.
Nice. So my question for you, as we begin this really crucial topic is what led you into entrepreneurship? What was it that drove you? What was your motivation to be an entrepreneur?
Ooh, there was quite a bit of factors that motivated me.
Mhm.
But I mean, us being immigrants and coming from back home, most of our family members, they try to steer us into sciences. You want to be a doctor, they try to get us to be nurses and things like that. And I
Mhm.
was never good at science, I wasn't good at math, but I was good at things that had to do with talking and things like that. And I
Yeah.
went to a vocational school.
Mhm.
And I think for me, being because my mom came from Liberia, my family came from Liberia in 2003. So seeing how much my mom worked and she didn't have any time for the family,
Mhm.
I wanted to have something like I wanted to be a business owner because I felt like it would give me more freedom, right?
Mhm.
And it will allow me time to spend time with my kids and things like that. So
Mhm.
that's what led me into the idea of wanting to be an entrepreneur. So it was either I opened a hair salon, but after I graduated college, I ended up discovering insurance, and I worked in the industry for a few years, and I decided, oh, this is something that I like. And in talking to other insurance agency owners, because the last job that I had in corporate, I was an insurance consultant. So I would go into different agencies and train their staff on how to increase productivity and marketing and things like that.
Nice.
So in talking to agency owners, I was like, oh, okay, this is something that I can do. And at the time we didn't have too many Black people in the insurance in the New England area that
Mhm.
were agency owners and things like that. So I decided to, take the bold step and just go ahead and open the agency. And years down the line, here we are.
Here we are. I am incredibly proud of you. I'm so happy that you took that bold step.
Thank
Most people are risk averse.
Yes.
They are terrified of taking risk, which is why they kind of stick with the standard business as usual. You go to a secure job, you do your 9 to 5, you come home, and it takes a certain type of person to go into
Yes.
entrepreneurship. What are some characteristics, like what is it you think about entrepreneurs that may be a little bit different about someone else that's not an entrepreneur?
I think
Mhm.
when people look at entrepreneurs to feel like they're people who don't fear, right?
Mhm.
At the end of the day, the fear still exists, right?
Yeah.
And I think the fear sort of goes along with you all throughout your journey.
Yeah.
But you get to a point that the fear is not the number one factor anymore,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So you feel the fear, but you still try to push through that fear.
Mhm.
And then another thing too, when you become an entrepreneur, there's a sacrifice that comes along with it that a lot of people are not aware, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people think, oh, once you get into business, you start making money right
Mhm.
away.
Mhm.
Immediately once you open your door, clients are going to start coming,
Yeah.
and things like that. And that's not the case with every industry, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
also, it depends on the industry that you're in. Depending on the industry, yeah, you may get customers right away. And depending on the industry, like for those of us that are in the financial industry, it takes time for you to build trust in the community, for you to build trust with people, right?
Yeah.
So there's that sense of sacrifice. And then there's that sense of, getting over yourself. Sometimes
Yeah.
we're our own worst enemy, right? You
Absolutely.
have to get out of your own head, right?
Mhm.
And tell yourself that this is something that you can do, right?
Yeah.
And this is what I always tell people. If you're not that person that can wake up every day and say, you know what? I don't like putting together a marketing plan, or I don't like doing social media, but I'm going to get up and do it anyways because this is not my strong suit. If you're not that person, then don't go into entrepreneurship, right? Because it's all about doing things that you're not good at, doing things that you don't love, especially
Yeah.
for the first few years until you start hiring people, right?
Yeah.
So these are all the things that, that goes into it that a lot of people are not aware of.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what I'm hearing, I love that you made the distinction between it's not that entrepreneurs aren't afraid, the
Right.
fear is there, but they brave through the fear, right? And that sometimes what keeps people is self-doubt.
Mm-hmm.
You're doubting yourself, but not only do you doubt yourself, but you doubt your abilities, you doubt
Yes.
your capabilities, and then
Yes.
sometimes it's even doubting like, can I trust other people? Can I trust the
Exactly.
market? Can I trust my
Yes.
community? So that doubt creeps into all these areas. And then I always say we have to be mindful not to get, paralysis by analysis, right? That means like we get so paralyzed because we've overthought it so much that we freeze. So
Yes.
entrepreneurs are like, they'll have the thought and they're like, I got this vision. I want to see it through. And the fear will creep in, but there's
Yes.
something within that says, you know what? I'm not going to let fear stop me. I'm going to push through because I can see my vision and I can almost feel it. So I'm just going
Yeah.
to, I'm going to push through. If I perish, I perish, kind of.
Perish.
If I perish, we're going straight through. We're plowing through. And I think that's what's really cool and unique about entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
Um,
most definitely. And just to share like a little bit of how I started, like when I decided to go into this industry, I
mhm.
had so this industry is a lot of older white men that are in the insurance industry.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of people trying to discourage me. I actually had a guy who told me, well, you know what? Most people don't last more than 6 months in opening an agency. So in 6 months, if you need a job, come back to me, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
these are some of the things that were playing into my head. And
Yeah.
then I come from a background, I didn't know anybody who owned a business. So I didn't have any business acumen at all getting into it.
Yeah.
And most of the people that I knew were in the health field. So
Yeah.
I'm sort of in an industry that I don't have anybody that I can look up to
Yeah.
say, hey, if this person can do it, so can I, right? So
Mhm.
I'm coming into an environment that I don't understand,
Yeah.
that there's no representation, there's none of that, right? So
Mhm.
I remember like my first month after I launched the agency,
Yeah.
I literally got depressed and I got paralyzed.
Mhm.
And I didn't end up going to the office for 1 week.
Yeah.
And the lady that I was sharing the office with, she was like, oh, I haven't seen you for 1 week. Are you okay? I was like, girl, I'm not feeling well. She
Mhm.
was like, oh, I thought you quit. I was like, why would you think that I quit? And then
Mhm.
she was like, well, because most people who open an agency within 6 months, they quit because it's just that tough, right?
Yep.
So in
Yep.
hearing that, it sort of triggered something in me.
Mhm.
And I went home that night and I had a conversation with myself. I said, Patience, what's the worst that could happen, right?
Mhm.
You can learn something. At the end of the day, you can always go back to corporate, right? But
Sure.
you have to give it your all so that if you failed, you can tell yourself, okay, I failed because I tried my best and it didn't work out.
Mhm.
But don't fail because you never started, right?
That's it. That's
Um, so yeah, so I just wanted to touch on that in case
right.
anybody out there is experiencing the same thing. The paralysis thing is super, super, super real, is a reality, especially in the beginning.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, it's so good. And we might even circle back to that at some point because it is real. I love that you said, don't if you're going to you can always go back to corporate, but if you're
Right.
going to not do this, it shouldn't be because you didn't start to begin with, but it should be
Yeah.
because you gave it your all. And just knowing
Yeah.
like I tried it, I gave it my all. Worst case scenario, I learned a whole lot that I can take back to corporate, or I go
Yeah.
back and I revisit, I let's tinker a little bit, let's tweak some things and
Yeah.
come back stronger, right? But
Mhm.
to not do it at all or to not move forth at all simply because you overthought it and it got too scary, it's not
Yeah.
an option.
Yes. Yes. Most definitely.
Okay. So we're here and the key when I was thinking about I wanted you on the podcast and I'm like, yes, that's my sis. We're going to talk about this. And then I had something completely different in mind and that I want to give you credit for this particular topic because this topic is a great one. He said, "Well, maybe we can talk about entrepreneurship and mental health." And I
Mhm.
thought this is excellent. So thank you so much for that topic. Um it's one that's needed and it's
Yeah.
one that's not talked about as much, but there
Mhm.
is a true science and research and practice to this whole idea of the link between entrepreneurship and mental health. So,
Yeah.
from your understanding and even from personal experience, what do you think is that link between entrepreneurs and mental health?
Yeah, I mean, both of them go hand in hand, right? And just speaking from my experience, because I can't speak for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Speaking from my experience, when you're running a business, especially if you're full time in your business like me, right?
Mhm.
Your mental health is important because you are only as good as your business, right? Your business rely on you, and then when you get to that point that you're scaling, you have employees and things like that, right?
Mhm.
Everybody depends on your mental health in
Mhm.
order for your business to succeed and for you to grow, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're depressed and you're not showing up, guess what? You're not showing up for your employees, right? You're not
Mhm.
showing up for your clients or your customers, right? If you're anxious all the time, right? And anxiety could lead to so many things, right? It could lead to some kind of sickness and things like that. If you're sick, if you're not in good health, right? There's
Yeah.
no way you are able to do your in and outs, right? That will bring in revenue for your business, right? And
Yeah.
then also that mental health thing of, okay, well, I need to get over this fear because it's this funk that you get into as an
Mhm.
entrepreneur. And sometimes you get stuck, right? Because you
Yes.
have no idea where to go or how to move forward. And then also, if you don't have a support system, right?
Yeah.
That plays a huge role as an entrepreneur. And I had to learn the hard way. You have to figure out how to find support in so many different sources, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got to that point. So I started my business back in 2020 in the heat of the pandemic,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
And then actually I started 2019. And then
Mhm.
3 months later we got shut down, right?
Wow.
And then I was like, oh shoot, like what do I do? Right?
Yeah.
Now I got all these bills to pay and nobody's moving
Period.
about.
Yep. Yep.
Right? Nobody's trying to buy insurance because no one is driving, right?
Mhm.
So I'm like, oh my gosh, like how am I going to pay my bills? Like how am I going to pay, at the time I had employees and all of that, right?
Mhm.
But I really got depressed during that time because I just didn't know the way forward, right?
Yeah.
And I had to remind myself every day as to why I came into the business, as to why I was doing what I was doing, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So that sort of helped me get out of that funk. But then
Yeah.
once you get to that stage that you're kind of scaling, you're like, okay, well, the same resources that you used to use in the beginning, those same resources may not be able to serve you in your scaling, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep. Yep.
so now you have to go and look for a different source of support. And that
Yeah.
support could be, okay, I need a mentor, right? I need
Mhm.
a support group of entrepreneurs they're doing the same things that I'm doing, so we can kind of like feed off of each other. And
Yeah.
then I also got to that point that I needed therapy, right?
Mhm.
Because the work has gotten so much for
Yeah.
me.
Yep.
And also coupled with personal things that were going on in my life at the time. I
Yeah.
ended up losing the baby. I've lost family members, all of it. It just became too much for me. So I
Yeah.
ended up going to therapy for 6 months.
Yeah.
Literally 6 months. I was in therapy. Sometimes being the entrepreneur, you get into this box that you're like, oh, you feel alone,
Yeah.
right? You feel
Yeah.
so alone. You feel like you're doing it by yourself. And
Mhm.
for those of us that are Christian,
Mhm.
one might say it's the work of the devil, right? But then
Mhm.
sometimes you're so bugged down about everything else that you forget that there are resources that you can reach out for, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yes, you can say it's the devil, but then also you have to play your part where you have to utilize resources around you, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so those are just some of the, some of the obvious one that I can relate to that I can share.
Yeah, I really love what you said. A few things that I heard that stuck out to me is that the being an entrepreneur comes with its share of stressors, and that
Hmm.
stressors can impact your mental health,
Oh yes,
and
yeah,
it can lead to things like depression and anxiety and fear. And sometimes, if it's not well managed, you might have to seek therapy from a professional, right?
yes,
And you
yep,
gave your personal experience with it is your life.
yes,
It doesn't stop. You
yep,
can't just clock out and it's done. This is I call my practice, even though my practice is going to be 10 years in April of next year. I still
hmm,
say my baby.
right,
This is a baby that you've cultivated from birth. You've given it your all, but life is still lifing, as they say, right?
yes.
So members are still passing away. You're still, I'm going through your own personal losses. I'm so sorry to hear about losing your baby. It's like all of those things are happening, but you still have a business that you
Yes,
have to
yep,
attend to. You can't pause. And when you have employees, other people are depending on you for their source of income so that they can
yep.
feed their family. So the weight of all that can really easily bring up some mental health challenges or mental health problems for an entrepreneur.
Most definitely, most definitely. And then
Yeah.
before I came into owning an agency, before we will hang out, when we'll go to conferences,
Hmm.
I would see agency owners drinking like fish.
Hmm. Oh, you understand the struggle now.
God, they will be drinking and drink. And I used to tell myself, like, why do they drink so much? Every time we go to an insurance conference, like they are just drinking. And
Yeah.
then, like, especially recently, I'm like, now I get it. Like,
Yep. When you're in it, it makes sense. When you're out of it,
yeah,
you're like, what's wrong with y'all? What's your problem? Can't you just go other ways? But man, it's interesting you talked about, about drinking because just to give, share some light or shed some light on this link that we're talking about between entrepreneurs and mental health is that what we do know is that just overall, entrepreneurs experience more mental health challenges than the average person for all of
most
the
definitely. Yep.
reasons that we've been discussing, right?
Hmm.
And they are three times more likely to have actually three times more likely to have substance abuse and addiction issues, right?
Hmm.
Three
Hmm.
times more likely, right?
Yep.
They're three times more likely to be diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Hmm.
They are twice as likely to suffer from depression.
Yep.
We're twice as likely to suffer from anxiety. In fact, let me mention the suicide stats, because suicide is increasing at an alarming rate and it's really, really scary. But for entrepreneurs, they're twice as likely to attempt suicide
Oh wow.
because the weight gets so much and that sometimes people there's this idea of I've poured my life into this, and if
Hmm.
something doesn't work or maybe we had years where things were wonderful and one thing strikes and everything is falling apart, they are twice as likely to attempt suicide. So this link between our entrepreneurs and mental health is a strong one. It's an important one for us to pay attention to, and I love that we're talking about it because there are entrepreneurs out there that are struggling in silence. They have no clue that
Hmm.
they're not alone, that other business owners, other entrepreneurs are also dealing with anxiety, also dealing with depression, and no one's wants to say anything, right? Because I think a lot of times what we see is that if you're an entrepreneur, you're the go-to person. You're the person that people are looking at like, that's my boss,
Exactly.
And
Yep.
you think that you're going to appear weak, if you actually say something. And in
Yep.
fact, they did a research, and they questioned a number of entrepreneurs and asking them, their opinion on disclosing their mental health issues. About 40% of them said that they believe that if they shared or disclosed their mental health issues,
Mhm.
it would negatively impact their
Yep.
business. So they
Hmm.
were not trying to say anything about it. And that's pretty significant to know
Yeah.
that almost half of people were like, I'm not saying anything, right? Because I don't want that to reflect poorly on my business.
Yeah, most definitely, because your employees can see you as, unstable, or
Weak.
even your clients can see you as unstable and things like that, right? But
Yeah.
because there's this high expectation, and entrepreneurs are held as such a high pedestal, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is you have to be ready to go at all times, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said, like, people are looking up to you, the community is looking up to you, your staff is looking up to you, your family members are looking up to you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can understand why, people might not be able to disclose, that information, because depending on the size of their business and things like that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. Like, I don't know if I get to a certain place, right? I don't know if I would do the same, right? Because at the end of the day, as you're growing, again, your reputation, it all depends on it, right? And you know how people are quick to cancel you, folks, these
In a
days.
heartbeat. And people
Right.
are looking to cancel you. And people are looking, I
Right.
was just talking to a friend earlier who was just like, the higher you go, especially unfortunately in our community, the quicker people are like, I'm waiting for this person's downfall
Hmm.
and I can't
Yep.
wait to
Yep.
see. And it's a really sad thing because we're really are to be elevating each other and seeing each other
Yes.
at a higher place, but
Hmm.
that's not always the mindset of everybody. So it's just like, of course, you won't want to say anything. If you're struggling, you're like, I'll keep it to myself because they're gonna
Yep.
like, oh, she's supposed to
Right.
be X, Y, and Z, but look at her, struggling with depression. Oh, did you know she just
Yep.
got diagnosed with bipolar disorder? Those kinds of things. And who wants that stigma? It's the stigma that keeps people from getting the help that they need,
Yep.
even generally, right? In our general population, people that have mental health struggles, 50% of them, and some research even shows in the upward of 60% do not seek treatment. Why? Because they're scared, because they don't
Right.
want the stigma, they don't want the label. And I always say, that's such a disadvantage because we don't the physical health concerns don't carry that same stigma,
Right.
no one with
Yep.
hypertension is worried about, oh, I got high blood pressure, so it's going to reflect poorly on my business, or I have diabetes, so it's going to reflect poorly on my business. But people with depression, people with anxiety, people that are battling suicidal ideation and thoughts, they're terrified to say anything because it really does. In the minds of other people, they might think, oh, how you can't be competent, you can't be capable
Right.
if you're struggling with all of these things. And
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
that's not necessarily true,
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, well, we've tackled the mental health component, in terms of like just like mental health struggles that or unique struggles that entrepreneurs face, and we talked about that mental health, that increased mental health piece. But are there other things we've kind of touched a little bit here and there on it? Are there
Yeah.
other challenges that's unique to entrepreneurs that might make them more at risk for mental health struggles?
I think, again, speaking from experience, right? Anxiety is a big thing, right? Because for those that are scaling, right? For those who have staff and things like that, right? And
Yeah.
expenses, right? Every business has expenses, but as you scale, your expenses becomes bigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know at the end of the month, I always get anxiety when it's 2 weeks before.
Girl, I get excited for my quarterly tax estimate. I'd be like, "Oh God, not again!" when I when my accountant sends me my notice, I'm just like, "Oh God," and like just instant sweat breaking out. So I hear you on that. Yes, yes, yes. Mhm.
the end of the month, I'm like, oh my gosh, here we go again.
There
And
we
I start
go.
looking at numbers and things like that.
Yeah.
And so that definitely, I know the regular population experiences anxiety and things like that. I think sometimes it's situational anxiety, but with
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, it's like you wake up, you go to sleep
Yes.
anxious
Yes. Yes.
every day, right? And I think the
Hmm.
depression that an entrepreneur might face may be at different like stages in their lives,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Definitely in the beginning, you could definitely feel that depressive, or when you start with this expectation, right? And I think sometimes there's
Mm.
an unrealistic expectation about entrepreneurship that people comes into,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And if you have this unrealistic expectation as an entrepreneur, right?
Hmm.
And you get into it and you realize that, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be,
Hmm.
right?
Where's my money? You're thinking about the money. You're not thinking about the
Exactly.
process. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Right. And
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people saying that, oh, I'm gonna go into business for myself because I can't stand I can't stand being told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I always say this, how you work for somebody is how you're gonna work for yourself.
100%.
Right.
Yep.
If you're not disciplined to
Hmm.
work on a project in your job, you
Hmm.
won't have the same discipline to do it for yourself because guess what? Now you're working for yourself and there's no boss to
Yeah.
tell you to do this, right?
And your
And then
livelihood
you get
depends
into
on
it.
it.
Yeah. You get into it, you realize you're like, oh shoot, I'm actually that lazy. Like
Laziness is my middle name after all. That's
right. Like it
yeah.
wasn't them, it was actually me, right?
Yeah.
So you get into it and then you realize, and now you start to get depressed, right? And
Yeah.
now you're like, oh, nobody wants to support me and things like that. Although there's some truth to it, but at
Hmm.
the end of the day, I think the realistic mindset that people need to come into entrepreneurship with is that it's hard work. And if you're not ready to work hard, do not come into it, right? We're
Yeah.
not trying to scare you from it, but it's
Yeah.
just work, right? But
Yeah.
that depression aspect of it, like I said, is seasonal because you get to the point your business is doing well, and then you
Hmm.
get to that point where you're almost stagnant because you don't know like how to move forward, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless you get some state, right? So when you get to that point, some people they might be depressed because they're at a place where they don't know how to move forward, they don't know how to grow, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
depression, I would say, is some of those like common factor that comes with entrepreneurship. And then as you're scaling to that fear of being exposed, and I'll talk about it from an insurance standpoint, right?
Yeah.
That fear of being exposed to risks where
Hmm.
there's a possibility your employees might sue you, there's a
Yeah.
possibility her S is coming after you, there's a
Hmm.
possibility this bill you're so busy you forgot to pay this one and things like that, right? And
Yep.
then you start to get this fear. Now it's like, okay, well, it just becomes overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
really becomes overwhelming. And again, these comes in pockets as you grow, right? And it comes in different stages. But
Hmm.
in my opinion, I think the anxiety part is something that I don't think it ever goes away. And
Yeah.
even like if I'm thinking of Oprah, because for me, Oprah for me is my mentor. I'm like, I wonder if Oprah feels like anxious, right? And the truth
Like
is,
it does sometimes. Yep.
truth is she does, right?
Yep.
Because
Yeah.
the bigger you are, the more hands now you have to like you're all over the place and things like that. There's multiple. So the anxiety for me, I feel like it's the most common, right? And the most regular in entrepreneurship. I mean, everyone is different, but for me, that's what
Hmm.
I've experienced on a more consistent basis.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and in addition to the anxiety and the depression that you mentioned, there, what I also heard is like setting unrealistic expectation can really kind of trigger some mental health problems and
Yeah.
challenges for people because you need to know what you're getting into. Don't just jump
Yes.
into it and think it's going to be easy and it's just for the money. When in reality, you get into it and realize I got to juggle multiple tasks. I got to
Mhm.
handle, uncertainties that comes up at any given moment. I got to
Yep.
deal with financial management. I need to don't God start hiring people, and you now have to manage human beings, and
Hmm.
it's a lot. So those are things that we don't necessarily anticipate, or some people may not think through. And when you realize, like, I got to do all these things, it's so easy to get to a place where you feel overly stressed. And,
Yep.
and when you're stressed and it's chronic and it stays long enough before you know you're now burned out. And it's
Yep.
that burned out stage that makes people say, you know what, never mind, I don't need to do this thing anymore. I'm over it, because you start to feel burnout because you're experiencing all of these different things that you did not anticipate.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Oh
And
my God.
it's there's nothing, and I always say that everyone's journey is different, right?
It's different.
You
Yeah.
can read all the books in the world about
Mhm.
entrepreneurship, right?
Yes. Yes.
Right? But there are certain things that are just specific to the experience that you go through, right?
Yeah.
Because how somebody handles something may necessarily not be how you handle it, right? For them,
Mhm.
that may have been the darkest season of their life. But for
Yeah.
you, based on your background and certain things, that may be easy for you, right? So I always tell people that yes, books are really great as you're reading to give you an idea, but you would never know what it's like until you're in the heat of it,
In the
right?
heat.
Until you're in the heat of it. That's when you're like, oh shoot, what did I do? Did I make the right choice?
Yeah.
Right?
And as we say in our community, experience is the best teacher. And experience
Yes,
really,
yes,
really, truly, as an entrepreneur, you definitely learn that, yep, experience indeed is the best teacher, because there's no amount of seminars, no amount of coaching, no
nope,
amount of workshops can prepare you for being in the crutches, in the trenches rather, where you're like, wow, I really have to know what I'm doing, and like I'm feeling the weight, I'm feeling the pressure. And speaking of pressure, there's pressure to perform, right? Like it's like
yes,
I said I'm going to do this thing, and now you put pressure on yourself to see it through. And
yep,
again, when you have employees, it's one thing if it's just you solo, because you're like, all right, well, you can talk to yourself, patience, you
yep,
know what? It didn't work, sweetie. You know what? Maybe this didn't work. But when you have employees who are, depending on you and they're looking to you to be that person, and
yep.
there is that added pressure of like, this must succeed. This has to be a success, because it's not just about me, it's about my employees and their families as well.
And
So,
they too are looking for to you for motivation, right?
yes,
They're
yes,
looking to you for motivation because they too they get to that point where they need a pick me up. And if
mhm,
you yourself you're not well enough,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
to motivate them, then you have an unmotivated team and an unproductive team because
yeah,
like your productivity depends on the motivation of your team and how you as the leader of that
yeah,
team is
yeah,
motivating them to perform, right?
yeah,
And I think that's why it's really really important for you as the leader to really take your mental health seriously because everything really does depend on you
mhm,
and how your team moves forward.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I, something that you pointed to a lot is this whole idea of support,
Yep.
and I think a lot of times what we find is that entrepreneurs struggle because they don't have that support. Being an entrepreneur can be really isolating sometimes, right?
Yep. Mhm.
Imagine, you know, everyone has a job, they're going to their job, they're talking to their friends, they're doing X, Y, and Z, and your job is to go and stay in front of your computer and think about your vision and write it out and do your marketing plan and do your business
Right.
plan and how we're going to do this, or I got to go to this business. You're just solo, especially in those beginning stages. And
Mhm.
when there wasn't a path that was laid
Yep.
out for you. Oh, your father was an entrepreneur, your mom was that's different. But if no one came before you to lay that foundation, it's uncharted territory, is a
Yep.
scary place to be, and it can be so isolating. It really can feel like no one understands where I'm at and no one gets me,
Yeah.
and we have to be mindful not to stay in that place. Like you said, we may have to cultivate some friendships, some mentorship relationship, some network, just so we can have that kind of someone you can depend on, someone you can rely on, right? Because
Yep.
without it, the weight of carrying a business by yourself is too much. You need someone there to guide you, to hold you up, to support you.
Yeah, most definitely. And what I tell people is, and even I've experienced this when I
Hmm.
started because my family didn't understand the industry
Hmm.
that I was coming in. Their
Yeah.
support seemed
Yeah.
different, right? Or the
Hmm.
support that was required of them seemed different, right? And
Yeah.
then I needed to find support in the insurance industry, because no matter how much my family tells me that I can do it, I
Mhm.
needed tangible evidence, right? That
Yep.
this is possible, right?
Show me
Um,
another person that's done it in my field.
right. I need someone who's doing it and they're doing it successfully, right? So
Yeah.
that I can emulate them, right? So
Mhm.
yes, my family was, they're great in cheering me on, but
Mhm.
I got to the point that I'm like, okay, I need a different type of support,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I need somebody who's in my industry that I can pick up the call and say, oh, listen, an insurance company said this to me. How do I, it's not a conversation that I can have with my family. And
Yeah.
I think also too, that's why entrepreneurship go wrong. They seek support from one source, right?
Mhm.
and in
Oh,
seeking,
you're talking.
right?
Yeah.
And in seeking support from one source, if you go to that source, think about it. They don't have any knowledge of what
Mhm.
you're doing. They're not in it with you, so they don't understand.
Yeah.
That's why it's important for you to have multiple sources of support
Mhm.
and multiple sources of, multiple mentors, right? So that each aspect, I think I learned not too long ago that each aspect of your business you need a mentor for. You need a mentor for the finance aspect of it, you need a mentor for the human resource aspect of it, you need
Yes.
a mentor for when you're scaling and things like that, right?
Mhm.
Because again, everyone's role has to be different, and
Yeah.
because these are all different aspects of your business. And if you go to one source for everything, sometimes it may not be sufficient enough. And I think that's why people feel like, oh, I'm doing this alone, right?
Yeah.
And then another thing too is people don't reach out. Like, find an entrepreneurship group that you guys can hold each other accountable, right? That you guys can talk. And
Yeah.
I have a great group of friends now that I can reach out to. I can send them a WhatsApp message. I'm like, ladies, I
Oh.
don't know about you guys, but today was a day.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
And they all understand. They're like, yeah, girl, me too. Right?
Girl. Yep. It's been real out here. It's real.
Once I hear your girl, me too, I'm like, ooh, okay, well, all right,
Oh,
since we're all in the same boat, I can go to
yeah.
sleep now, right? But back to what I was saying, you need to have multiple sources of support and not just rely on one source, so it doesn't feel like you're in it alone, right?
Yeah.
Because that's
Yeah.
what brings that feeling of being alone, because you're only going to one place to get fed.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
I just appreciate that you brought up that point because you said it so well, and this is just buttressing the importance of being able to. Everyone's not the master of everything.
Yeah.
We don't.
Mhm.
Some people think they're jack of all trades, master of none.
No.
But you have to know that like there is a person for each aspect of your business that could really guide you a lot better than you could,
Mhm.
or than your one mentor can, right? And when it comes to scaling your business, that's an entire area of expertise by itself. That's a whole that is scary territory, and you need someone to be like, breathe with me, girl, breathe
Yeah.
with me. We got this. This is what I did. This is how I got there. And again, even if you had just one person and you're trying to go to the same source, we can unintentionally drain our one source. Our
Yep.
intention isn't to drain them, but we can,
Mhm.
and they're not going
Yep.
to tell us that that we're draining them because they love us so much. But they're thinking, "Oh God, this girl is calling again with some
Call it again.
do that. We don't want to do that. We want we want them to be happy to pick up our call to give assistance, right? And so
Mhm.
I just really appreciate that you added the importance of mentorship, not just one mentor, but mentorship in different aspects of your business. As you
Mhm.
grow, you're going to need it. You know,
Yeah. Yep.
um,
Most
something
definitely.
I something I just thought about that we didn't point out is the challenge of a work life balance when you're a business owner, when
Oh.
you're an
Oof.
entrepreneur. Like,
Oof.
Lord, you
Oof.
what has been your experience with that? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Work life balance. Where do I start? So it's something that I'm still working on. I don't
Yeah.
think there's that balance there yet. I'm still working on it, but there's few things that I've learned to do over the years is to pay attention to my body,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, so I have this thing that when I get to the point that my face is twitching, that's my
Mm-hmm.
cue. It's
Oof.
time for me to rest.
Mm-hmm.
It's time for me to literally tell all my employees that y'all, patients needs to sleep. I'm not picking
Mm-hmm.
up any calls today. Today's my day off.
Yeah.
You guys handle it and let me get some rest. And I will literally stay home.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I have to sleep for 10 hours, I do it. I'm a sleeper. For
Yeah.
me, my self-care is sleep.
That's it. That's it. It's necessary, girl. It's
My
necessary.
self-care is sleep because
Yeah.
I'm usually driving around, I'm going here and there. So
Yeah.
sometimes sleep is something that, I don't get as much. So
Mm-hmm.
when I get to that point, I pay attention to my body, I
Yeah.
pause, I take a day off, and I sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I've gotten good at. I would probably say like over the last like 12 to maybe 18 months, I've gotten really good at.
Yeah.
Before, I think I used to wear this badge of honor. Me going is so
Mm-hmm.
shows that, I'm working really hard.
Oh, I'm working hard.
Yeah, no, no. And I don't want to work hard no more. I want
Mhm.
to work smart,
Right.
right?
That's right. That's
And
right.
in working smart is recognizing when to slow down. And
Yeah.
then also having a good handle on my schedule and not neglecting certain things in my life, because at
Mhm.
the end of the day the business will always be there, right? The business will always grow. It's a journey, right? It's not and I always tell myself I'm in this for life, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I shouldn't have to neglect certain things in my life. So I've gotten really good at handling my calendar. And
Mhm.
when people, tell me things, putting it on my calendar
Yeah.
and marking off that date and making sure that I plan my schedule in a way that I can show up for the people, that are in my circle,
Yeah.
right? And show up for people who also need my attention, because sometimes we forget that as entrepreneurs, we forget that our families need us and they
Yeah.
need our attention. And we
Yeah.
think that going, sometimes you let go of really good relationships because you're going, right, and you forget that life is happening also as you're building this empire, whatever you might call it, right?
Mhm.
But I've learned to time management, my calendar. If
Yeah.
it's not on my calendar, it gets
It's
forgotten.
not gonna
That's it.
happen. Yep.
It's not gonna
Yep.
happen.
It's not gonna happen. Not a year or
It's
two.
not gonna happen, right?
Yeah.
But also, just really slowing down sometimes and understanding the seasons too, right? Because I think I'm in it long enough to know like which quarters are the busy quarters in my industry, right? And
Yeah.
which quarters I can be like, okay, for the next 2 weeks I can slow down, that's when I can get the rest that I need and things like that. Those help. But I think the more you are in the business, the more, you start to figure out like where the busy seasons are and
Yeah.
where you should sort of slow down, things like that. But
Yeah.
we're all learning it. I don't think you ever perfect it.
Yeah, yeah, we're
Yeah,
all learning it. We're all learning it. We're learning that work-life balance because you don't shut your business off. It's
exactly. Yep.
available, it's present to you. But I really love that you mentioned that sometimes, especially in those beginning stages when you're trying to establish a business, your money's going into it, your time is going into it, your resource, your mental energy. We can pour so much into our business. I was sharing with you. Before we even got on here, that I remember when I started my practice almost 10 years ago, and no one in my family had started their practice and was going down this path and all of that. So it was brand new for me. And I remember spending countless hours staying up 2, 3 in the morning. I'm trying to figure
Mhm.
out how do I get my business name? How do I get it incorporated? How do I do this? What do I need to know? What are some, missteps? Okay, how do I do a business plan? What the heck is a SWOT analysis?
Yep.
There's just so much, that you
Yeah.
you pour in. And I remember one time, like, I had done one thing and it was a step that I missed and I needed to go back and do that thing. And I just sat there and I remember just bawling my little eyes out, like,
Yeah.
baby, it's just
Yeah.
not going to work. It's just not going to work, because there's no roadmap, But guess what? When I came, like, what I did, and I'm so grateful that I had the thought to do this, is that I created a step-by-step instruction on, like, establishing a psychology private practice. How do you go about doing? First, you do this, then you do. So elementary, and
Mhm.
that painful experience has allowed me to be able to, like, freely share that with my colleagues who are, early career psychologists. They're trying to go into private practice, and I'm about to start charging, girl, because they be getting
You
my
should. You
out.
should.
I'm like, just really give away that knowledge. Like, let them
You
know, hey,
should.
I did it. The whole consulting, pay me.
Yeah,
I cried, and you didn't have to cry. But
right.
to be easy to be able to like pay it forward, it comes with a price.
Yes,
and
yes.
that price sometimes is not having that balance for a while, and it, and, and,
Hmm.
and we're it's a balance that we're still trying, all of us, I think, at different stages to try to strike it.
Yeah.
But I appreciate your honesty in saying, listen, it was tough, and I'm still getting there.
I'm still getting there. I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. And that
Neither am
crying thing is real. Like I always tell people it's okay to cry. Like
I.
nobody is too tough because entrepreneurship will break you. If you think you're tough, come to become an entrepreneur, you will cry. Like
Yep, for
and it's
sure.
and I think it's okay for you to cry because I've come and I've shed a few tears this year about, my business because I'm in that scaling stage and
Yeah.
it's tough. Like, and I recently got into, well, I've graduated now because I completed my final project. The Goldman Sachs has this program called Black in Business.
Oh,
And the,
yeah, love
yeah,
that. That's my girl. Go ahead, sis. Yeah.
And the goal of that program is to help us scale our business. And when I tell you it has been the toughest 10, 12 weeks of my life,
Yeah.
it has been so tough because I've been challenged on every side, right?
Yeah.
And I've had to cry. And I would call my mom every day, like, Mom, listen, it's tough. You got to pray for me. You
Pray
got to
for me, Mom. Pray for me.
pray for me.
Intercede on my behalf.
And
Yeah.
some days I would just cry it out but then when I release that tension by crying it out, it allows me because what I was doing was I was staying up till 4, 5, 6 in the morning to complete my final project. And in doing that, the stress just got so much because I was literally balancing everything all together. And a few balls dropped,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
That's just
Yep.
the
Yep.
truth, right?
That's the nature.
A
That's the
few
nature
balls
of it sometimes. Not a few balls.
was dropped,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I got to the point that I was like, if you feel like crying, it's okay for you to cry, right? Because I think sometimes, especially for those of us that are Black women, we feel like, oh, if I cry, I may come across weak or I may not, But who cares? Like, cry it out, girl.
Yeah.
Those tears is extra stress that you're releasing.
Release
So,
that stress.
yeah, so cry. If you need to cry, girl, man, whoever you are out there, cry because you're doing something you love.
Yeah.
And the thing is, as adults, right, our brain sometimes, the moment you're trying to challenge your brain, it gives you this pushback. So you have to push through. And
Push
in
through.
order for you to do that, sometimes you have to cry through it. So, yeah,
Mhm.
so that's what I've discovered.
Yeah, yeah. Don't let me get on my soapbox about the importance of crying and what crying does, and the neuropsychology of crying. Crying is important, and those of us, not just Black women, but I think especially those of us that from African descent, like
Mhm.
we have this mindset of like we're tough, and
Mhm.
tough at all times, and we take so much pride in that, and we wear it as a badge of honor. And what we're not realizing is that, like, yeah, it's we are tough, we've gone through a
Yeah.
lot, but crying
Mhm.
does not make you weak at all.
Mhm.
Crying
Mhm.
is your body's natural way of expressing and taking out the toxicity that's kind of building within. It's like, I have this tension, I have this pain, it's too much, I gotta get it out. And so your body naturally says, well, either we shake it out, we scream it out, or we cry it out. Something's gonna
Yeah.
come out. And it's
Mhm.
perfectly fine. A lot of times after you cry, you'll realize that you feel a lot better. You feel
Yep.
relief. In fact, there's clarity of thought often after
Yeah.
you
Oh,
cry,
yes.
because there was so much mugginess in there. It was so foggy. It was busy. And
Yes.
my saying always is, when emotions are high, logic is low. You
Mhm.
cannot strategize when your emotions are high. You can't
Yep.
think through anything when your emotions are high. But after you don't cry, and snot nose and all, you wipe it all out, and then you're like, huh, I just
Oh.
had a thought. It's like an epiphany or something. You have an epiphany, and then boom, there you have it. You can leave with something new to try out. So cry it
Mhm.
out. It's perfectly fine.
Yes, guys. Yes.
This is a nice place to kind of transition into our advice for entrepreneurs. You talked about self-care, but I want to add to that, if there are any advice you have for entrepreneurs that may be experiencing mental health challenges right now as we speak, or are trying to be proactive and make sure they don't fall into that place of burnout and stress and depression, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, so if you're out there, one of the things that I would tell you is don't feel like you're alone, right?
Mhm.
Definitely seek help. There are multiple resources these days. There's Facebook groups, right?
Mhm.
There's LinkedIn groups and things like that. Join a network or something that has entrepreneurs in there that have similar experiences to you.
Mhm.
Now, if you feel like, okay, I can't thrive in that environment, you can always go to therapy, right? And talk to somebody on a more intimate level, right? And then also find a group of friends or, family members, like talk to your family members. But if
Mhm.
you feel like you can't talk to your family members, find somebody you can trust,
Yeah.
right? That you
Yeah.
can talk to, right?
Trust is key.
Because if you don't talk it out,
Mhm.
you're just going to feel alone. And
Yeah.
sometimes when you feel alone, you start to isolate yourself. And then when you
Mhm.
start to isolate yourself, who knows what could happen, right? And then that's when those suicidal thoughts and things like that come about.
Mhm.
So definitely seek out help if you're getting to the point that you're so stressed out or you're depressed
Mhm.
and you don't know what to do. Like reach out to somebody. You can reach out to Dr. Simmons. If anybody wants to reach out to me that's going through anything, like reach out to me. I'm more than willing to share my stories with you, my experiences with you, to help you get through those trenches, right? And then also for those that are looking to get into entrepreneurship, we don't mean to scare you, but at the end of the day, it's tough and you have to have realistic expectations coming into it.
Yeah.
And when you come into it, if it's not working out for you, don't be ashamed to go back into corporate, right? Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, some people are like, oh, I don't want to give up because, I'm ashamed. What are people going to say about me? Don't let that stop you. If it's not working for you, maybe that particular business plan wasn't the best business plan, or that business idea wasn't the best business idea.
Yeah.
Go back to the drawing board. If you need
That's
to go
right.
back to corporate for a year or two, however long, go back to the drawing board and don't be ashamed, because at the end of the day, no one is an expert at this thing. It's a journey and everyone's experiences is different. So don't feel ashamed that you started one business and didn't work out. If you hear majority of this like large corporation owners, they've
Mhm.
failed at business multiple times,
Multiple
right?
times. Multiple.
Multiple
Yeah.
times, right?
Yeah.
And eventually they found a formula that works, right? You could be in the wrong industry, so go back to the drawing board. Don't be ashamed. Don't
Yeah.
worry about what people are going to say, right? Those who are saying those things are cowards, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
Don't be ashamed of that. But at the end of the day, reach out for help. Talk to somebody and don't take your mental health for granted.
Yeah.
Everyone depends on you. Your family is depending on you. You're depending on yourself, believe it or not,
That's it.
and your business is depending on you to be your best self.
Yeah. Oh man, such great advice. You've said it all. You've said it all. You were ticking all of the boxes as you went along, and I'm just like, oh, that's why I love you so much. I appreciate you. Um, yeah, you really said a lot. I guess if I could add anything, I would say it's okay to take breaks. You
Yeah.
don't have to be on all the time. You don't
Hmm.
have to be on all the time. Stop, take a break, put something on hold, go take care, self-care, go take care of yourself, go on a little mini vacation to clear your mind. You'll come back refreshed, I promise you.
Yeah.
um Sometimes we think, I can't take a vacation right now, I got to focus on this. Guess what happens? You're focusing on it, but you don't have any fresh ideas. You're really just like going over the same thing over and over with no type of progression. But what I
Yeah.
have found is often when you do step away and you take a break, you come back with like brand new ideas to move
Hmm.
you forward. So
Yeah.
breaks are important. You don't have to be on all the time. Um, I love that you mentioned sleep earlier because I'm just like, sleep is life. Sleep is
Sleep
life. You
is life.
You don't understand. For those of us that don't sleep enough, when you do sleep and you get a good enough sleep, is the best thing ever. So
Yep.
sleep well, because that sleep regulates your mood, your mind, your thinking, your all of those things. Your metabolism is regulated by how well you sleep. So sleep
Mhm.
well, eat well. And then last but not least, this is something I had to learn is delegate well.
Yes.
Well, you're gonna
Let
do
it
it
go,
well.
let it go,
Yeah.
let it
Let
go.
it go. You don't have to do every single
Yes.
thing. I will
Yes.
share a like really crazy anecdote, and I know she's probably gonna see this. I won't say her name, but I recently delegated the office management and the billing to someone that I absolutely trust,
Mm,
and within a couple of weeks, because I was like, oh, I got this. It's not a big deal. Blah blah blah. Blah. Within a few weeks, okay, she has done so much more and given me so much more peace than I have given myself in 10 years. Okay.
wow.
Um, I needless to say, I've lost way too much money that I'm ashamed to say out loud because I just was not on top of it.
Yeah.
With clinical stuff, I can do that all day, every day. You want me to consult? You want me to see you? You want me to talk you off a lot? I am game. But like, I'm not following behind these insurance companies that are like rejecting my money. They don't
Yeah.
want to tens of thousands of dollars. You hear me? Like
Wow.
when I said that, I wanted to cry when I saw how much we left on the table. I left on the table because of my unwillingness. And she's been saying this for a while. I got you. Give it to me. It's okay.
Mm.
I got you. And I am grateful to her. Bree, you know who you are, girl. For taking over that task. I just said I wasn't gonna say her name, but she knows. She knows. But taking over the task because now it's like I can sleep in peace,
Mhm.
knowing that I've given that part to her. And it's important to have someone that you trust and delegate these things to them. Know your role. You can't do
Yeah.
everything. In the beginning, it's important to do everything because guess
Yes.
what? If God forbid something happens to that person, you can go right in. Oh, I remember how to do my billing.
Yeah.
Oh, I know this thing.
Mhm.
I know how to do my credentialing. I know how to credential my clients and patients. But you know those things. But
Yeah.
when it's no longer necessary, just pack it up and
Yep.
give it to somebody. And so
Yep.
the knot in your shoulder and in your stomach can be released and you
And your
can your
neck.
neck, your jaw, your eyes that are twitching
Yeah.
like this, like all of those things. Just like do yourself a favor and delegate well. All right.
Mhm.
So those are the only things I would add to all of the marvelous advice that you have. This brings us to the end of our podcast and on entrepreneurship and mental health. It's been a blast having this
Yes.
conversation with
Yes.
you. I loved every second of it, and
Yeah.
I hope to have you on for another episode another time. And I
Sure.
hope you enjoyed yourself.
Thank you. I had a great time. It was a great topic. I mean, I always looked up to you for many, many years now. So thank you so much for all your support. You've always cheered me on from day one since we met years ago through Yell, right? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and now we've transitioned into, owning businesses and things like that. But thank you so much for everything you've done over the years. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. And I love seeing my sisters, my brothers. Everyone wants their tribe to go up. If it's
Yeah.
someone from Liberia, West Africa,
Yeah.
I'm just like, that's my boo. Let's go. Like I just love watching your progress. And of course, I'm always here, always cheering you on, and it just kind of like lifting you up. It brings me so much joy to see you grow over the years. And I know that you're just continuing to go up and up and up and up and up. So keep doing what you do, keep inspiring, keep making us
Thank
proud.
you. Thank you,
Um,
sis.
we bear the weight of not just representing for ourselves, but we represent for our family and our culture and our continent.
Yes, yes.
And so it's a heavy burden, but it's a beautiful one because when you're doing it well, so many people appreciate your effort. And I
Yeah.
certainly am like first in line for appreciating your effort. So thank
Thank you, sis.
you
Thank you. I
everything.
appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me.
So I hope you I hope you enjoyed this episode on entrepreneurship and mental health. Oh, Patience, please tell the people if they want to follow you, where can they tell them about your socials or anything you want to share with them? How can they contact you if they wanted to know more and to reach you?
Yeah. So if you guys want to find me, I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. You can find me at Patience Noah Insurance, or you can just type in Patience Noah, and all my information is gonna come up. If you're looking for insurance to check to see if we offer insurance in your state, just look up Patience Noah Insurance on Google, will pop up, and you can
Nice.
check and see if we offer policies in your state. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you
Thank
all for
you.
joining us. It's been a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast on entrepreneurship and mental health. Of course, for us, we're trying to grow our channel. So, like, share, and subscribe on YouTube. Listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Pod, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, we are there. Okay. You can find us at the Bare Naked Podcast or the Bare Naked Pod on all of our socials, Insta, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, we're on there. So again, thank you, thank you, thank you. Like, share, and subscribe. And I'll leave you as I always do. Be the light that shines in someone else's darkness. Thank you so much.